screenshot this? Like, how do you take like a video kind of screenshot if you're putting it on YouTube? Is that just one of the options for the live stream for that, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'm using Open Broadcast Studio, and we are live
Wow.
with Radio Free Transarctica, episode 4. I have Miss Naomi DiVine from Reno, Nevada, who is a artist, musician, all-around cool person, light worker extraordinaire. She does all the things that she does.
I'm happy to be joining you in Hillsboro, Oregon today, Lex.
Yeah,
Traveled all the way.
I'm deep under the Antarctic ice, and
oh, okay. It was a quick plane trip. Actually, it was pretty easy. So, I'm glad. I didn't realize I'd traveled that far, but it's great to see.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. It's nice to. This is our first one where we've done like kind of a video call, so we're just kind of playing it by ear and seeing how it's gonna go. I'm just sharing this link around so that people can maybe join in or maybe not, or who knows. But they will enjoy it one way or the other. We will force it.
You know what? You and I will at the very least. At the very least, I'm sure you and I will.
I'm sure.
And beyond that, that's great.
Yeah, it's everything else is just a bonus. That's
exactly.
So there's been a lot going on, of course, in the world with COVID-19 and stuff. That is not really our focus.
There's a lot of little going on in the world, though. Is the thing it's like there's so much going on, but there's so little going on. But that's okay.
Well, and that's definitely that's one of the topics that we've talked about quite a lot. Is that there's there's a lot of let's say disagreement about exactly how much truth there is to some of the aspects of it. I mean, I definitely believe that there's a virus that exists and that people are getting sick from it and people do die. People are dying. But the rate is very slow compared to like the standard flu. And some of the symptoms are confusing and they don't really line up correctly with various media sources are saying. And different studies that have been done on it are kind of like mincing words about it. So people are talking about like, well, is this a human-created virus or is it was it a bat in a soup? The bat soup.
Right.
And so
trying to get the whole planet to agree on anything, though, like.
Oh yeah, well,
I think everybody in the planet can agree that something's going on, and that's. I think more agreement than we've had in the past. It feels like everybody's getting on board.
I mean, that's definitely true because I feel like I've never in my entire life, and I don't know if anyone has ever seen cooperation on this level internationally.
Right.
Where like pretty much everyone's on the same page about it. It seems like because I talk to people all over the world. I was talking to someone in Mexico earlier. I talked to a lady in New York City earlier. And then I have friends in Norway and Germany and England, in Japan, in Thailand, and who I've all talked to recently in the Philippines recently, just today. And everywhere in the world is shut down. I mean, it's like, if it was a media hoax, like the people on the ground, I would be talking to someone on Facebook who lives in the Philippines. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, there's nothing going on." Like they wouldn't be able to censor.
Incredible teamwork on either way. It's an incredible teamwork.
So in that sense, there's definitely something real going on.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been discussing.
I think the thing though too, like if you can talk to all those people, like it's something that really we're in a point right now where there's so much connection, where there's so much disconnection, and we feel like we're getting disconnected from the people right next to us. But we're also like able to get so much more connected with people further away. Like I went to a thing in New York today that no way I would have gone to. There's no way in hell I could have gone to it. I went to my friend's like what do you call it? They had like a I want to say a wedding reception, but that's not the word. Like they renewed their vows.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it was beautiful. They did it by the river here in Reno a few days ago. I don't think I would have gone. I don't think I would have been invited if it was like an actual thing. But it was online and they invited me to it. And I was like, hell yeah, I'll go. Like, I would love to go to your 25th anniversary wedding renewal. Like, and it was one of those things that, like, you get to go to things that maybe you wouldn't have, or you get to go to them that maybe you wouldn't have gone to. And allowing for like different connection in those ways, which I think is really cool. Is kind of one of the positives I think that's coming out of this.
Yeah, and I mean,
is like getting closer to people that are further from you.
Actually, that's something that's been great for me today. Is I just kind of had the idea. I woke up this morning and I was like, I should just offer to give people tarot readings and like I Ching readings and rune readings.
Yeah.
And I gave like maybe at least a half dozen, and people donated money to Radio Free Transarctica, and they donated, just for tarot readings and really, it was interesting. I've never thought to like market that, because I've just always done it for fun. And I'm not really trying to sell it. I'm not really trying to. I don't like to sell things, you know me very well, so you know that I'm not really a salesman. Actually, that's one thing that
but donation based. I run that way a lot too. Of like just saying that things are donation based. I'd rather you be here and participate and be a part of it. And it did cost us money, so please chip in. But if you can't chip in, like come in anyway.
Right. And actually, there's a great theater company here in Hillsboro, Oregon, called Bag and Baggage. It's right on the main strip of Hillsboro. And I was just starting to get involved with it when, of course, everything got shut down to coronavirus. But I started to get involved with it because I was walking down the street and I had my ukulele and I was just kind of hanging out. But I walked by and I saw people gathering at this place, and I asked them, "Oh, hey, what's going on?" And they said, "Oh, we're having our director's going to come in. We're having an opening night for one of our plays, and she's going to explain. She's going to do a question and answer session." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And they told me
that's a cool way to start.
Yeah, tickets were like $15 or $20, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have any money right now. I'm just kind of playing ukulele and hopes of making $1 or $2 or something." And they were like, "Oh, well, just come in. It's fine. Just don't,
Yeah.
Because
we gotta ask for this because we gotta keep moving forward, but we'd really rather you just come in.
Yeah, and that's very much how. I mean, with you and your work at the Potentialist Workshop and what we did with Cool Tape Sound Collective, and I remember
one time we did this event at the Potentialist. I don't remember what it was. I think it was even a speakeasy, and so the speakeasy was this cool recurring event that we were doing at the Potentialist, or rather that Niles Quinn was doing, and Mac Esposito, and oh shit. There were other people whose names I can't remember, but they're all lovely. And so they were doing this recurring event, and it was the speakeasy, and they'd like dress up like 20s style attire and the whole shindig. You had to have a password to get in.
Yeah.
They had to cancel it for the month of March. And I was like, gosh darn it, we needed this more than ever. We needed the like prohibited underground bar scene with the flappers and the suspenders, and we needed it so much more than we've ever needed it before, but I had to cancel it.
That sucks because it's like
that's a tangent. But I remember one time somebody was like, "Oh, like I think that was the event." She was like, "How much is it to get in?" And we're like, "Oh, it's like suggested donation,
Mm-hmm.
And there had been people who I think hadn't paid. This lady put in $50. So I was like,
Yeah.
I say suggested donation. You can put in however much you want. And that lady drank as many beers as she wanted that night. I just kept bringing her whatever she wanted. I was like, you're fine. Like,
that was like when we did our first big Cool Tape show. Well, not the New Year's show, but we did the first big one at the Potentialist.
right. Which was March of how many years ago? 4 years ago?
Yeah, it was a number of years ago.
It was March, though. We were coming on some kind of anniversary.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, if probably a lot of my listeners don't know this because I don't talk about myself and my historical projects very much. Right now, I'm working on this podcast and I'm working on my lecture series on the secret teachings of all ages and things like that. But they most of my following is online, and so they don't know us personally, and they don't know you.
Right.
So would you like to take a little bit of time to maybe explain what you like to do, like, or what you do, what you have done in the past with Cool Tapes and with the Potentialists and stuff like that?
One thing that I really liked, I think this was kind of a quote from something Johnny Rowling said about it, but I was talking to him maybe a year ago or so, and he kind of referred to Cool Tapes as being like a rough draft in what all we were doing. And he's living in LA now and just put out a record and has been doing, he was helping Chris Kepley and Matt Bad with the podcast recently.
Okay.
And helping with producing and getting into all these things. But basically he was like, that was kind of a rough draft. And I felt like for a lot of us, it kind of was, right? And it was meant to be a collective of different artists helping each other and working together and trying to share our skills of different artists. And at that time, it was a lot of people who were just starting out. And I think everybody really kind of tangented from that, and everybody kind of went on to doing their own thing. But yeah, we were just trying to get people together. We were trying to get musicians together, and I think everybody learned a lot from it. It wasn't
it was a good learning experience.
But the idea of it really was, and we were just trying to get different artists and musicians together, and that's a lot of what the Potentialist is.
Yeah.
But that was the first time that I was ever there. I've been a resident artist at the Potentialist for like 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time that the first time I was ever there, I started hanging out there. You and MJ played for that Bob Ross impersonation experience.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did the Bob Ross show.
Yeah. And then we did that show when all of the Potentialist people went to San Francisco and they left us in charge for the weekend.
Oh yeah, that was fun. That was really great.
That was fun. You know, it was so funny because you filmed one of the songs that I did that night. You played one of them with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't mean to perform at all, but like somebody had performed and I was like, oh, I have something I want to play, you know, and I wasn't on the bill or whatever. And Brian gets up in front of the mic and he's like, all right, Naomi DiVine's going to perform next. I was like, she's what? She's going to do what? I wasn't prepared for that at all. But he had just announced on the microphone that I was up next. And I was like, well, I guess I'm up next. So that was like the first time I performed, and that got filmed and put on the internet. And that song is going to be on our album when we finish it.
Oh, yeah?
Which
That's
everybody
great.
always has.
Is that on
Wait, hold on, I want to add this, or I want to do this, or...
It's on Cat Stanley's album, or A Bitch About Robots?
It'll be a Cat Stanley album.
Awesome. Yeah.
Bitch About Robots is just only technical difficulties, and none of those songs can be replicated. I can't play them again. We've never played them like that before. We can never do that again. We'll have some good times. It's good dance music, but it's not replicatable.
Yeah.
But Anton was saying about one of the songs, he's like, oh, we never play it like this. Like you played it slow on the album version. And I was like, I went back and I listened to a demo that we'd made, and it was faster, and then I was going back further and further in time until I eventually got back to that original recording from 4 years ago. And it's so slow. I wasn't very good at guitar. I wasn't very good at all, honestly. But it was so slow, and it was kind of cool though. I was like, I love that all this time later, that's still gonna. I started hating that song, honestly, until then. Some of those songs, they've come around. They're so old now that they've come around a second time and now they mean something else.
Yeah.
Like, I've become a different character in the song. Like, I was once this character and I was singing about somebody else, and now it's like, oh wait, but you turned into that person. Now it's you.
That's true.
It's just like a different story, but that's okay. I think that's how you know it's good. Like, it's maybe relatable if it gets to be relatable to you in a different fashion.
Right. I mean, actually, a lot of my songs are kind of like that, where I love them when I'm writing them, and then I hate them afterward, and then I come back to loving them because they were a mark of a time in my life. But I want to just backtrack real quick and go over, because a lot of people don't know what Cool Tape Sound Collective was and what the Potentialist Workshop is, because they're not from Reno and they don't know Reno stuff. So Reno, the biggest little city.
Reno. This is the inside of my house in Reno. This is a painting by Eric Holland, who ran for mayor a couple times. But he's in Oregon. He's closer to you now than he is to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, Reno is called the biggest little city in the world, and it really pretty much the most accurate description you could think of for it. It's
they shut down all our casinos and bars, so it's just art now.
Yeah, it used to be a casino city that was kind of played second fiddle to. Well, I mean, it predated Las Vegas by a long time, but after Vegas became big, it kind of became second fiddle in Nevada, but has come through a new cultural renaissance, and revival of arts and culture in Reno, and both of us were kind of on really the rising wave of that in the 2000s, 2010s decades, and so we worked together on Cool Tape Sound Collective, which was a nonprofit. Well, the idea was to make a nonprofit record label collective, because not all of us we had so many friends who were talented musicians, but none of us had anywhere to play, and none of us had anyone to record us, really. And so we all were making great songs all the time, and we just needed to collaborate in order to get stuff done. We worked really hard on this project, and we had a lot of really great people that worked on it, and we were doing everything on a pay what you want model, or on a donation based model. And we were very passionate about changing the world, man, changing the way the music industry works.
One way at a time, one thing at a time.
And we ran into serious problems of various kinds that ended up in kind of a pseudo catastrophic breakup that could one day be on VH1 behind the scenes.
It felt like it, but like I said, years later, I think we all kind of, everybody, it was a group of young people too. There was nobody who was really established in it at all. Yeah. And so, which I feel like was maybe a great downfall, but it was also kind of what we were about, and so we were trying to figure these things out, and how to really get together and do shows in different places. And I came to realize one thing that I've really enjoyed. When we were doing Cool Tapes, I was so much of we were promoting and going from one venue to the next. We didn't have a venue. We were doing meetings in that church, which was a whole other collective that we were doing at that point, was working for that church.
Yeah, but it was fun working for the First United Methodist. It was fun, but
Yeah, that was really interesting. I feel like that was a part of it. That was so connected with it. It was separate, but it was so much of the same people with MJ and Aaron and them.
Well, what's funny is that so few of the people working on that project at First United Methodist were even Christian or religious at all.
That was really the issue. I don't think they knew that when they hired us. Because I remember at one point, them being like, yeah, you guys they gave us a topic and we said what it meant to us, and they were like, yeah, you guys didn't really talk about Jesus. And I think Aaron was like, oh, we're just trying to be more relatable to the youth. And we were like, no, you just got the wrong group of kids.
Well, I definitely credit that.
We mean well and we love you, but we're not necessarily gonna Jesus.
Well, of course, you know, I feel like that was instrumental in me like coming back to understanding Christianity personally.
That was the point. That was Aaron's whole goal, was to get us in there. And maybe if we had no other impact, get us back into Jesus.
Yeah.
They're like, you guys weren't talking about Jesus. And we were like, yeah, we forgot about him.
Sorry. But we definitely were doing great work in terms of light working. I mean, we were making people happy and spreading joyful values and spreading the values of like love and community fellowship and brotherhood and sisterhood and, you know, positive values that I think almost both of the, like the whole scene in Reno almost is tied in with like what people talk about the star seed and indigo child generation. You know what I mean? Like in like a growing up group of people, especially in Nevada, which has such a long history of involvement in like black projects and like Area 51 and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that had families that worked in the military or worked in those type of projects. My dad worked for Lockheed Martin, and they run the skunk works down at Area 51. But he didn't. He worked mostly out in Moffett Field in Mountain View, California, or out at Beale Air Force Base near Grass Valley. But the atmosphere in Nevada, like in terms of, it's funny because it's like in terms of extraterrestrials and aliens and things that we talk about on this show a lot. It's like Reno is definitely has been a weird spiritual nexus for a long time that kind of centers around some things that have to do with that, some things that have to do with Burning Man and the Burning Man culture that has.
Were we talking? Was it you that we were talking about this the other day? That probably Reno this summer is just going to become Burning Man since they canceled Burning Man.
Yeah, I feel like
just take over the entirety of the town with aliens and please.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that'll be fun, but Reno doesn't have. I mean, if this COVID stuff's still going on, then Reno will really benefit. Hopefully, I would hope, or it will be totally trash, which is what the burners tend to do. But you know, I mean, Reno has a really love-hate relationship with Burning Man people because they both bring a lot of value and money and good things, but they also bring a lot of damage to the ecology and kind of like sometimes they're just kind of assholes. Rich tech people come from all over the place, and it's very interesting. But Burning Man is like I mean, we got guys like all the head honchos at Google go out there every year. The guys at Apple are out there every year. Like Elon Musk goes out there. Like all of these people who are, and I bet Elon Musk and the big Tesla factory in Reno has something to do with. They considered Reno first, probably because they got exposed to Reno through Burning Man. Well,
I know Story County too is pretty. That's where all of those things are, is in Story County, and they were trying to get industry. I mean, there's nothing there. There's Virginia City there. I went to Virginia City actually a couple weeks ago for the sake of to see it before it turns into an actual ghost town. There was some people there. It wasn't that ghostly. But there's not really anything going on there. So it was just wide open space and people who wanted to make some money off of it. So it seemed like a good fit.
Yeah, it's, I mean, Reno's definitely benefited a lot, but also one of the big things that you work on or have been a resident artist at the Potentialist Workshop for a number of years, which is kind of like Cool Tape Sound Collective, but for more physical art mediums.
With a venue.
Wait, it actually has a building.
What I really appreciated is when I started like booking shows there and I got to do that kind of thing, I was like, I really like being the venue person as opposed to
Yeah.
moving venues all the time. Like, I got to have different promoters come in and work with different people. And a lot of those people, those were connections that I made through Cool Tapes to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Jack Rice, even still work with him considerably on a regular basis through there and booking shows there. And he put his ass through the wall one time, which was pretty funny. So I got to be and they were pretty good about it too. Somebody came up to me who was running the show and was like, yeah, there's some holes in the wall. And I got to be the venue person who was like, okay, well, you can patch them up then.
Dang.
Just patch them.
Yeah.
Just fix them.
Yeah.
And because we always try to, do good deals there and make it accessible.
Potentialist Workshop has golden deals. I mean, like, they really help people out with the venue space and stuff like that.
We really try to. It's a blessing to have that space. There's Greg and Spike are still down in the basement doing Loudest Folk stuff.
Okay.
They have their private studio down there. So it's just turned into its private studio space for the time being while we can't do events. People are still going in there and playing music really loud.
Well, that's
to
good.
No audience.
I mean,
but there's been some Art Town events that Art Town has been doing stuff, and so they've come down and used our theater space. We were able to host a poetry event that usually takes place at the Holland Project, which is another phenomenal art music venue here in Reno. Reno has a lot of stuff like that, where it's like we try to combine, knowing that all of the arts need each other and having spaces that really you kind of connect all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely, and there's the Generator and what is that one that's over on 4th Street, like on West or 2nd, I guess it's on Dickerson.
Yeah, Reno Artworks.
Reno Artworks, that's right. Yeah, it just has a name. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I haven't heard what they're doing recently. I know the Generator shut down, and the Generator was so much of a Burning Man place. Staple, they had such a huge facility, which made it possible to build those huge sculpture projects. And so I feel for those people, because that's really like, they had so many members and everything. They were just nobody use your space, I
heard that they were redoing the Morris Berger Hotel on 4th Street, like the whole inside of it or something like that. But I don't know very much about that, but
I'm not sure what's going on there as of recently. My friend Josh was working there, but he left there and actually has been up in a cabin in Montana since all began. And he keeps saying every week, he's like, well, he was saying this about the Morris. He was like, I'm going to quit next week. And I was like, no, you're not. You say that every week for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's been saying that every week since he's gotten to Montana. I'll be back next week. And we're like,
yeah. Well, now I'm glad we were able to take a little bit of an opportunity to talk a little bit about our history together, working together on art projects and stuff in Reno. And
for anyone else watching this, Reno's cool. Come to Reno, I guess.
Yeah, Reno's dope. You should visit Reno if you can. It's a very underrated city. I think it's one of the most underrated cities that I've been to, probably, in terms of national lists and like national recognition. People think about Reno and they're like, like kind of knockoff Las Vegas, gritty, gross.
Right.
But it's nice. I mean, it's.
Well, and there's been so much of we've got a good river, and there's, like I said, there's been so much of there's a lot of people who are trying to make it arts and music and culture, and the casinos and bars are closed, so that's all there is.
Yeah.
Not that you can go to any of it, but that's all that's happening.
Yeah, definitely Reno must be hurting right now, but our focus of the show is to try to talk about ways that we can try to keep our light up and be a light into other people's lives and be a light in our communities to try to build things like these projects that we've worked together on, and you ever since we worked on Cool Tapes together, you've been like constantly at work on some kind of creative community projects for that basically the whole time, which is very impressive work to do, and I'm sure it's very much appreciated. I mean, I appreciate it personally, but I think many people in Reno probably appreciate you, and so it's nice to be able to give you some credit on a show that's outside of Reno, or
thank you.
kind of to a broader audience. But we personally, I mean, I don't know how much I don't know how much you want to talk about this kind of thing, but you and I have talked about all kinds of things about time travel, aliens, psychedelics, you experiences with spirits and ghosts and like demons and whatever. Like we talk about everything that we talk about on Radio Free Transarctica on a personal level.
We did have a really nice conversation the other night, and you were like, "Be a podcast," and I was like, "Yes, it could, but not right now. Not right now." But we were on a good run, actually. Yeah. I think the conversation that we were having the other night would have been good, but it's
gone now.
It's gone now. It's not all for the screen. Some things are just private, I guess, and so just you and I get to enjoy that, but we'll try to do something.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. I mean, we've been fellow travelers on many journeys, so I appreciate having you on us to share some time and space on this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What kind of projects have you been working on recently that are focused around, trying to keep people connected, or trying to make the world a better place, trying to bring more light to the world?
One thing that I was doing, and I'm not there now, but my some people that I was living next door to, their granddaughter then lived like the next door over. So it was one of those situations where like grandma and grandpa live here, and then mom and dad live next door. Yeah. And that's a good situation. If that can happen, that's always really cool when that kind of thing happens. And so this little girl was, we were just hanging out on the hill, and so I had this little banjo, which it's an ukulele, but it's a banjolele. It's like an ukulele, but it's got a banjo body. Right. And so I was playing that, and all the neighbors were just banging on stuff, like whatever they could find. Like wind chimes and empty propane tanks and just whatever, tin cans, whatever was just like lying around the yard and things like that, and we're kind of up on top of the hill. So there were like some neighbors down below who could see, like they weren't on the same street, but they were like further down across the street and over a little ways. So we were kind of higher up at a higher elevation, and they're looking on, and the next day or whatever, the grandkids are banging on stuff, and Yoxton's like 2 or 3, so he was just throwing things. He was throwing rocks at things and making sounds, which wasn't a great thing for him to do, but he was having a wonderful time.
Well, as a 2 or 3-year-old does.
As they do, they just throw stuff sometimes. But it was kind of cool because it was really like, it was a good thing for everybody's day. And the little girl Kaylee came over like the next time and was like, "Oh, when are you guys doing band practice again?" And just simple things like that, where it's like, you can still have those moments where I need to turn a light on in here, actually, speaking of light, but where it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a big production. But if you go outside in your yard and you can see somebody across the way, and the people are just banging on tubs that they found, and it may or may not sound good from down there. Who knows what it could sound like from the bottom of the hill? But it's good. It like just those positive moments like ring a lot louder than I think sometimes the quality of it necessarily. Like you want to do a good show or a big production or whatever, but sometimes those simple moments really really ring out and are memorable. And I think especially for those little kids too, you know, if that's something that people aren't used to. Like you and I are playing music all the time.
Right.
So it's not a big deal. But I think people that aren't so into that all the time, especially now, like it makes it anytime, it makes a big difference. I think to bring light into people's lives when you just walk by and somebody's just happy and playing music and just going about their business. It's good.
It's very much true. Some of our community members, when I posted about the subject topic, were brought up that they Anna Nerba brought up that he's a musician on the side, and he says being creative is definitely a way to connect to the inner light in a person. And another one of our guests, who's going to be our guest on an episode this coming week on it's going to be about entheogenic psychedelic chemicals and their ability to contact extraterrestrials or extra dimensional or just other entities, some type of entities that are outside of the normal pale. And he's had some experiences with UFOs and things, but he mentions that he's a drummer and musician and producer. And a lot of the people that are in our community are creative people who value it very highly, the creative aspects of things. And for me, in order for me to not go insane, now that I'm not working...
Any more than you already have, right?
Right. Well, I mean, there's no helping that. There's no helping the amount that's already gone.
Hold on, I have to turn the light on because it's too dark in here. The sun has gone down.
Okay. So for since I lost my job at Intel at the beginning, or at the very beginning of March, basically, I've had a lot of time on my hands, and so I've been trying to find ways to connect the community better also. And that's why we started doing Radio Free Transarctica, the podcast, why we started really trying to push that out. And I back up my Secret Teachings of All Ages lectures to try to have these connections with people, because otherwise I outside of work, I hadn't really met that many people up here that, especially after COVID-19 stuff started happening, they just didn't want to, like, people were not hanging out. They weren't interested in that. So,
or it limits who, I think even something that may happen think about, like, who you're spending your time with, right? Like, if you're going to go out, if you're only going to go out one time, who are you going to choose to go spend that 2 hours with? You know, if you haven't left your house in this long and you're going to pick one or two people to go hang out with.
Right.
Choosing who's so important to you that you're willing to go out and see them.
Right.
Which, priorities. We find priorities a little bit. And meeting new people is scarier than it used to be, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
Or it feels that way.
That's some of the ways that spreading light has manifested for me recently has been because I just feel like I'm just not as afraid of catching the virus as a lot of people. I have a strong immune system and everything. I'm just not that worried about myself being sick. I'm more worried about becoming a carrier of it than I am worried about myself getting sick. And but I've done a lot of work to go, and especially since I moved to Portland, in general, Portland area, I've done a lot of work helping the homeless downtown. And since the coronavirus shut everything down, it's crazy to see how the homeless are living now. But it's also awesome to see how many people have stepped up their willingness to give food or to help people. But the people who are surviving by handouts, basically by begging for money on the street, there's no one to beg handouts from. So And there's no restaurants.
What I've noticed is like those people have to be very persistent about like I've had people come right up to the car window and they just, you know, knock on the car window, or a homeless guy came up and wanted to pump my gas. But it's like you can't just like kind of holler at people because there's not people out like that. So it's really, unless people go up to them, you know, they got to be really persistent about that and really like, and that's rough. I've been trying to do that too. Usually I participate in Food Not Bombs and go and distribute food. But the place that I used to always go, I'd get donations from. It was a bakery that would give me everything that they had left over at the end of the day. And they'd give me like 3 bags of food every week, you know, like 3 whole bags of food. And so I would just pass that on.
Right.
And last time I went, I got one loaf of bread. And I was like, well, I wasn't prepared for that. If I'm going to do that, I have to, you know, that's got to come out of my pocket now, and I got to make food, and I got to like,
yeah.
Because if I would literally just drive over and they'd give me 3 bags of food, but they're not making that kind of excess anymore. And in fact, they're not really, they used to be a cafe and now they're a tiny bread grocery store.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of places have suffered a lot from the economic shutdown. And so it's been difficult, I think, for a lot of people to kind of maintain their lifestyle in the way that it has been going, because it seems like most people in America are living paycheck to paycheck. Even if they're making a lot of money, they just have larger bills. So a lot of people are spending huge chunks of money on rent, for example. I mean, like, you know, we talk about how ridiculous rent is for us, and it's like, you know, the most I've ever paid for rent was $1,000 a month, which is huge to me, but
for a very small,
right, in San Francisco or New York City, $1,000 a month can't get you anything, not even a studio or anything. So and that was the $1,000 a month I was paying was here in Portland for a studio apartment, but basically the very smallest kind of apartment that they had. So but there's I mean, obviously the sky's the limit as far as rent goes. There's places in Manhattan that are like $1 million a month to rent. I mean, like ridiculous sums of money. If you want to live in like Manhattan around Central Park, you're gonna have to.
Right.
pay.
Do you want a view of Central Park? I don't know how much that costs to be able to look at the park.
Right. Yeah. Do you want a view? If you have a view of a brick wall, it might be a little bit more price reasonable.
Be affordable.
Yeah.
But location. Yeah.
And
you get to be in the place. I think also, though, I feel like people who have gotten past that, who aren't at that like paycheck to paycheck level, are people who are older and maybe people who are more at risk. And so those are people who are like afraid to go out, are people who are a little bit more set and a little bit more stable to stay in. And that's not to say that you can't share beyond that, but I think it's at least more with people that I know, people that I think that are older and that are more, may also be the people who are a little bit more set to stay in one place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's definitely, I mean, it's definitely been a struggle for a lot of people, but
so everybody's trying to find the light. We're looping back.
Yeah, everybody's trying to do that. And I think
we're trying. This is the whole thing of this episode, is us trying to stay positive.
Right. But, you know, actually, I've been successful with several different ways. Right now is Ramadan, so I'm fasting from sunrise to sunset in solidarity with...
It looks like it's sunset for you now. You also look like you have a halo.
Yeah. Well, that's just natural.
That's not light behind. This is
Oh,
my new
that glitched out weird. um, but yeah, I think, well, for me, a big cornerstones of my practice are like, I think fasting is very important as a way to disconnect your uh, like your physical needs are like always weighing on you, right? You have your physical drives, like there's the drive for food, water, sex, like basic warmth, basic things, and we're very focused on them usually. I mean, getting those that list checked off is the most important thing. But
right.
if you take a period of time to say, I'm just going to ignore those things, uh, you end up gaining a lot of power over them by realizing how little power over you they actually have, or how unimportant relatively they are compared to how important they feel.
Right. You are capable of continuing whether or not you have done these things today. You are capable of continuing still.
Right.
Still being okay, still being a human being.
It's definitely, especially for eating. People can go a long time without eating. I mean, like some people that have, like people who did prison fasting, like they would fast in prisons, like Irish prisons were famous for this, where they would go on a hunger strike, where they would just refuse to eat anything, while the conditions were poor, and people survived for months. I mean, before, and people did die of starvation, but
yeah,
like, but they survived for a lot longer than you would think.
Doesn't a certain amount of caloric intake, though, like if you're not using that many calories, like you don't have to eat that much if all you're doing is sitting.
Right. I mean, that's true
if
too.
You're just sitting and sleeping. If you're like walking great distances, traveling, like it's gonna weigh harder on you than if you're just like, I'm just gonna sit here and I'm gonna, not to say that it's not challenging, but just that like your body isn't, if your body isn't using that many calories, you don't really need to intake that many calories.
I mean, that's very true. The more sedentary your lifestyle, I mean, while you're fasting, if you're doing a serious fast, you probably shouldn't be running marathons or anything like that.
Right.
Because your body will start digesting your muscles, and like I forget what the precise condition is called, but you end up, you end up just like basically passing pure muscle, and it ends up like you're peeing red and all kinds of bad stuff. Like, you wouldn't want that. No one wants that.
Yeah.
But for me, a lot of so my basic regimen for my, let's say, my mental health, but also my spiritual health, is fasting is part of it. I like to fast from something most of the time. But it can be anything. It doesn't have to be like food or water. It could be like, sometimes I go on social media fasts. I say, like, I'm not gonna go on social media for X amount of time. Like, I've done a week-long social media fast. I've done a day-long social media fast, and like all kinds of things. I've just been like, I'm not gonna go on any social media. I'm gonna turn off the internet on my computer. Like, that's one thing on my laptop. I have a kill switch for my internet.
Yeah.
I turn off the internet while I'm like, I need to write this thing. I'm just going to turn off the internet and write it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do days. I've been doing this more recently too, where I'm just like, rather than just saying like, I'm not going to touch social media, whatever, I'm just like, I'm just not going to touch my computer or my phone. Or like, I'm just not going to touch it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to touch it all day today. Maybe I won't touch it tomorrow.
Yeah.
What do you need to tell me? I mean,
right.
It's I don't know what's so important that it can't wait 2 days. I'm just not going to I just won't touch it. If you're writing something, like, yeah, you want to use your computer for that. I want to get typewriter ribbons so that I can start using my typewriter again for that reason. So that, because it's so easy to get distracted that way if you're trying to work on something, you're trying to write something. And oh well, I'll just turn music on. And then music on turns to this website, and this website turns to this website, and then what was I writing?
Yeah, that's one thing about our society and our culture today that is that we become very skilled at triggering human dopamine responses. So like we're very good at creating an app that hits your pleasure button in your brain. Like people have learned how to invent a game that keeps you interested by like, oh, here's an achievement. Here's a little thing you got. You got a new hat. You got a new pair of shoes. How cool is that? How cool is that, dude?
Hat, yes.
Don't you want a new hat? Don't you want to look cool? Like, so the game keeps people engaged by this kind of system of hitting the dopamine button over and over. So, like notifications for Facebook or notifications for TikTok is a really, really bad one. I started a TikTok recently just for fun to try to see what it's going on.
Yeah.
And TikTok sends me the most outrageous number of notifications, but they're like aimed at the Generation Z audience, like the Zoomers, and their attention, people have said, like, it's kind of like a meme that attention spans have been getting shorter and shorter, but it's also pretty true. Like, kids' attention spans.
I don't think that's a meme. I think that's just a thing.
Yeah.
Well, but kids' attention spans were always terrible.
Yeah, that's true.
To an extent. They were kind of always terrible.
But if you go and you watch a Hollywood cinema movie from the 1930s and you watch it today, the pacing is like molasses compared to if you go and you watch. This is like I hated Avengers Infinity War. Michael Jackson had me sit down and watch Avengers Infinity War with him.
I could never watch it. I was like, I can't vote for Infinite War money. I just can't. We already pay for it. I don't want Infinite War.
Yeah, I don't want Infinity War. I don't want it.
I don't want this. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see you pretend to make it.
Yeah,
I know it was a big thing. I never saw it. I was just not about the Infinite War, but I can understand how you might get looped into watching such a thing.
Yeah, I did.
When your friend tells you to, and you love him, and I love him too.
Yeah, that's our good friend Michael Dwayne Jackson. His name's Michael Jackson, but and he is a black man who sings very, very well, and he has
well.
He's getting a degree in opera music, and he plays piano, and he's a very talented musician.
He should be graduating right now,
Yeah, he should be if it weren't for the whole thing. But he probably still is. It may just be postponed.
That's what I'm saying. He's probably still graduating. He's been setting himself up for that. So way to go. He went to school and did his thing.
Yeah. And he's definitely a woke individual. I would like to have. I probably could have him on the show, and he and I. The only thing is, we just have to not get mad at each other because we always get very, very heated because we have very different opinions about history in particular. But
but that's why it's so good that you guys are friends. It's really important to have agree with.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of I even think about when you kind of asked what I wanted to do for this episode, and I said about like sharing light. I think that too, of a certain amount of like sharing information and bringing light to things that like you didn't know existed or he didn't know existed or whatever, differing opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And how important that is, even though that's not the kind of thing that brings dopamine to your brain. It doesn't always feel good to find out that you don't know something or to disagree with somebody. It doesn't always feel good, but it's one of those things that you got to do. And I think that's something that we've gotten to, like, there's so much of, like, online, even people that are friends with each other, like, oh, well, we're not going to be online friends because we disagree so much. It's like, well, you don't have to comment on their thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to engage with it, but it might be good to know that it exists and have that light shed a little bit. But
Yeah.
I think that's important. But I have seen, it's been a while, but I have seen you guys get very upset with one another.
Yeah, we definitely have. A lot of that has been in the past. Alcohol has been involved, and I would say
That'll do it.
that'll do it every time, pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, alcohol is. This is one of the things that I've noticed from many years of substance abuse is that every substance has a certain wavelength that it goes with, and everything from like alcohol and marijuana are downers or depressants. They're but at varying levels, and then there are other things like caffeine is the most basic stimulant, but there's amphetamine or cocaine or any of that stuff. And then psychedelics are a whole different set of wavelengths. Like that's a whole different kind of thing. But in our society, like cigarettes, alcohol, coffee are basically the most basic forms of, let's call them chemical mood regulators. And people use it. I almost think of it as like you have like your body and your soul is like an airship going through reality, and you have to adjust the ballast somehow.
Yeah.
So it's like if you drink alcohol, it's like adding weight, and then you start to sink a little lower. And if you drink coffee, it brings you up a little bit.
I remember having this job. I was working in a real estate office, and I can do office work. I have an office job now, and which is great. But I hated this real estate job because I was raising people's rent, and then my rent got raised, and I deserved it. It's like it sucked. It sucked like working for a landlord and not making very much money, and it was just garbage. But I remember every morning I was trying to find the right balance of like the right amount of smoking weed with the right amount of coffee, and we were living across from the coffee house at that point. Trying to regulate my levels at that point of like how much caffeine do I need to be able to wake up early enough and function, and how much weed do I need to be chill enough to do this. And it became so much of me trying to find a balance that I was just like, I need to quit this job.
Right.
Because if this is the only way that I'm trying to function this morning, this is not going well.
Well, and that was actually a big problem for me when I was driving trucks for the United States Postal Service. I was a contractor for the United States Postal Service, and
I never knew that it was the Postal Service. I knew that you were driving trucks, but that was never a detail that was included.
Oh, I'm surprised. I was working for
the guy who doesn't have stamps now.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, well,
I'll mail you some stamps. I found them today.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I have been writing you some calligraphy stuff that I've got to send you. So when I was a truck driver, I was working such long hours that in order to wake up in the morning, I had to take 5-hour energy shots or caffeine pills or sometimes stronger stuff.
Beyond that, it was getting beyond the caffeine.
Yeah, but then when I got home, it would be I had to drink beer in order to be calm enough to fall asleep, and I hit this cycle where I had to take uppers to get up, and then I had to take downers to go down, and it was like I was purely chemically, like my natural cycles they were gone, and I was purely regulating myself off of self-medicating like substances, and that's a really terrible place to be for
and then you stopped doing that, yes? And then what happened? It was good news.
Yeah, after driving a truck off of a cliff and off the side of a mountain and losing my job and almost dying,
and learning how to play slide guitar.
Learning how to play slide guitar because my hand was broken. Yeah, I then, I guess after that, I started getting, I decided if I'm going to die driving trucks or doing my job, I should just dedicate my life to my music. And I got really, really serious about my music then, which was great. But I was still using a lot of things. Eventually, after going on tour with the fellow knees and falling off a bridge in Southern California when I was really, really drunk at 4 in the morning in Silverado Canyon, which was such a stupid story. I didn't try to kill myself, by the way, for people who were. I actually legitimately accidentally walked off this.
Yeah, it does sound like you drove yourself off.
Yeah, I never have tried to kill myself, but I have succeeded in almost killing myself multiple times, but not on purpose. So,
we're glad for that. Way to go.
Yeah, so
You haven't done it. You're still here to tell the tale.
Yeah, I hope I praise God. I think that there's a reason for it. I hope that there's some reason for it, that I'm here to do something. But after that was when I moved back to Reno, and as you probably remember, I was living in my van. I stayed with my mom in Hawaii for 3 or 4 months. And then when I got back to...
You know how ridiculous that is that you fell off a bridge in Southern California?
Oh, that I fell off a bridge in Southern... You cut out a little bit, but I fell off a bridge in Southern California and then went to Hawaii.
And then, yeah, just went to Hawaii to recover. That seems like the ideal place to go to recover. And yeah. I know that it's just because your family lives there, so it actually makes sense. But it's ridiculous.
It is, yeah. But and that's also where
I hurt myself, so I had to go to my tropical island retreat.
That on the island of Kauai, where my mother and my aunt and my little sister live today, is also the location of the Hindu temple, the Iraivan temple, where I first studied Hinduism with some of the monastics there, the monks that were living there on Kauai. And
I had really meant to go there earlier in the year. Mostly I'm just a fool and I had a panic attack, and so I didn't go. But it was mostly like financial issues that came up right before I was supposed to go, and I was just like, I just asked all my friends for money. I just screwed up my car, and I was like, I be the next week like in Hawaii. Like, I can't take time off work to go to Hawaii when I just asked everybody for more hours and money for help.
Well, highly recommended at some point in the future.
I know, I should have gone. I think that was the thing that I was most looking for, was going to that temple. I was very excited. And then it came time for me to get on the plane, and I was just like, this doesn't, I'm in no way prepared to do any of this.
Yeah.
So I didn't go. That was a great choice of me, I think, but that was how I felt at the time.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm just checking on the I was just checking on the YouTube chat.
Are you being criticized too much for being wildly?
Oh man, you keep cutting out. I wonder what's causing this. If there's some way to fix it.
Well, now you're cutting out.
Uh-oh. That's not good. Well, our friend Dogmelon, he said, my friend was just talking about some 40-minute talk some dude did, specifically talking about how to manipulate people into buying DLC for video games. Yeah, that's what we were talking about how they have basically a manipulative system to get people to keep spending money on video games. And he also notes that only losers don't try to kill themselves on purpose. I think it's the opposite. I think no one should try to kill themselves. I very much believe that there's absolutely no reason to do so, and in doing so, basically sets you back way back in the game.
Right.
Like, you got to go back to square one.
You know, I've been, of all the people that I know that have tried to do it, I don't know anyone who's succeeded, which is
at least there's
just a reason not to try. Because Right? Like, I know plenty of people who have tried and then they woke up like, oh, fuck. You're in so much worse shape if you try and fail than if you just try to keep going to begin with.
There's definitely, there's some weird stuff with that where sometimes I think that this is a way out there theory, but sometimes I think that we talk about alternate universes a lot, right? And there's in my understanding of the cosmology of the multiverse, there's basically an infinite number of universes that occupy a space where all the different possible variables that could lead to a different situation are manifest in some universe at some place at some time. And so if you're alive, for example, when I was in my truck crash, I was alive in that universe, but say that in that truck crash I had a 90% chance of dying. What if 90% of the universes that had me living in them, I died, but 10% I continued, and I just swapped to one where I survived. I swapped to one where and that's why I had such intense experiences of touching the other side and seeing. I kept seeing ghosts for months, for like weeks and months after that. It may have been due to a severe, maybe it was a concussion, but
I think that the spiritual and the scientific reasonings probably overlap.
They merge at some point.
Right. Like, you probably saw ghosts, but probably also had a concussion.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of both. I think it's just kind of different, I don't know, different views of why these things happen or how they manifest, more or less.
Well, the truck I was in rolled, according to Highway Patrol, they said it rolled 12 times. So that amount of rolling, there was no sign of any head trauma, but your brain on the inside of your skull jostles around. So I may have gotten scrambled up in here, but not,
right.
I've
never known you any other way. I met you after.
Yeah. Well, I guess I changed a lot, some people say. But I also think that it was possibly from almost dying and coming to terms with that.
Right.
Where if you have a severe near-death experience, it's like it just kind of changes your perspective on your priorities and things like that.
I was talking to somebody one time about their astrological sign, and this was a person had some kind of near-death experience and experienced like amnesia from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he no longer identifies his astrological sign as the time he was born. It's the time he woke up from a coma.
Damn. That's a very interesting thought. Have you ever heard about...
He was like, I used to, and I don't remember exactly, I don't know what the dates are, right? But he used to identify as one sign that was related to his actual date of his birth. But then there was a sort of second birth where he came out new and he had to learn all these things again, He was like, no, so I'm that, and changed so much that so. And I think besides his family, I don't know how many people he even still like talks to from before that. I know he was in a relationship and that ended because he was no longer the same human being. He wasn't the same person anymore. Have you ever heard of
a kind of experience called it's a category of near-death experience called a walk-in experience?
Huh.
So a walk-in, the concept is that basically like our human body is like a spacesuit, right? If we think about it as like a machine, and we think like our consciousness is kind of like downloaded into it in like a spiritual sense, where like kind of downloaded into our body. So you can go through this idea of a walk-in is that you have a near-death experience and your body is sure that you're going to die, so it hits the disconnect on your spirit. Your consciousness goes back to whatever else, but your body doesn't actually die, so it remains functioning, and someone else's spirit walks into it.
Oh, huh. As a permanent basis?
On a permanent basis. And so
on a permanent basis.
So
okay.
So people have, and they that can have all kinds of shades of gray. Where for example, people can have talked about walk-in experiences where the person doesn't actually like leave their body, but another spirit enters their body, so they feel like they're partially possessed. Some people feel like some people who have alien abduction experiences feel like they have like an alien consciousness that's in their body with them. And it can be identified as a kind of dissociative identity disorder or a kind of multiple personalities disorder, but it's
right.
There's marked cases where someone's personality changes significantly in a near-death experience.
Right. One thing that was interesting about this person that I was talking about, he was saying something about how like he used to play bass, or he was in a band or whatever, but he doesn't know how to play bass anymore because that when he was relearning how to walk and talk and all these things, one of the things he didn't relearn how to do was play bass. But I was like, how do you know? Who told you that you played bass? And he was like, oh, I read it in one of my journals. And he was like, I've always liked writing. He said he has like the same hobbies. He likes the same things. He just goes about things differently. So there were some things about him that he kept. And who knows how much that is. If you wake up and you're a person with a bunch of journals about yourself, I guess you're going to read them. And then probably assume that you like writing and continue writing. So I don't know how much that was. I don't know. That was just kind of interesting. There were things about him that stayed and things that he was like, no. But again, I didn't know him before or after. So
one interesting thing. So there's this idea that I am a fan of. That's the idea that the human body actually has three brains or three nervous system centers. So we have our branching nervous system in our cells. This is an interesting thing about like jellyfish. Jellyfish have a decentralized nervous system. So they don't have a brain that's like anywhere in particular. They have it spread out. And octopuses also have a spread out brain. But humans, we've come to find out, humans have a lot of nerve tissue actually in their heart, and they have a lot of nerve tissue in their gut. And so people have thought that there's actually three brains for the human. And the first brain is what we normally think of as the brain, which we would call the cranial brain. And then there's the cardiac brain. And there's the intestinal brain or something like that. And that kind of aligns with some of those ideas of the chakras, of the chakra energy centers. But an interesting thing that indicates it is that people who have had heart transplants often have an experience where their sense of taste changes, where their favorite foods change. And I remember hearing one particular case. I believe I heard it on Coast to Coast AM. I don't have the reference for it right now, but I remember this case very vividly because I had to listen to it a couple times because it was so interesting to me. This person had a heart transplant, and before he had the heart transplant, it was something like he couldn't stand mustard. He never liked mustard. Something kind of silly and small. But after the heart transplant, he suddenly loved mustard. And he met the wife of the person who died and gave him the heart. And apparently...
A mustard-loving fool?
Apparently, he loved mustard. And so the guy's sense of taste changed when he had a heart transplant.
Huh.
And I wonder about that, like people who get like baboon hearts or like bovine hearts, do they suddenly like bananas or grass or some kind of
Huh.
or maybe it's not a real thing, or it doesn't have anything serious about it at all. I don't know. I don't really know.
I know that and I had kind of felt similarly about this too. I wondered, because I think there's a certain amount of like this like tri-level like different versions of your personality, right? In like your sun sign, your rising sign, your moon sign, right? How those are kind of three different aspects of you that may describe like different versions of yourself. I remember reading at one point in Marina Abramovic's autobiography. She's that performance artist,
right?
That you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If you don't know who I'm talking about and you're watching this, I'm not going to explain it. Go look her up. She's cool.
People should know on our show, because she was involved with that spirit cooking stuff and all that stuff with John Podesta, which is kind of weird stuff. But yeah,
she's weird stuff, but she's cool. But she had described that and like feeling that sometimes there's like that kind of like coexist. I've kind of felt like that too. There's like different versions of each person's personality that maybe other people don't necessarily notice, but you kind of feel it.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm kind of, I don't know, different explanations for why.
Yeah, it's almost like you're changing gears. Sometimes you change gears. You know what I mean?
Certainly. Where
it's like you're the same person, but you're in different situations. Especially people have a mirror-like quality where they tend to mirror their environment and the people that are around them. And so there's a lot of people that people will notice. One of the huge things that people always notice is like if someone gets a new boyfriend or girlfriend, new significant other, and suddenly start acting different. Everyone notices that. Everyone knows that. But in part of it is that
it feels like they could pinpoint it to that too, which if you like have this because this, right?
Right. But at the same time, if you hang out with the same person in like two different very different friend groups, or like if you hang out with the same person and they like to play Dungeons and Dragons with these people and they like to play golf with these people, those are they often will act completely differently in the two different groups, and the social dynamics change enough.
Like you may be the dungeon master in one group and really suck at golf in the other group, so you're not the leader, right?
Yeah.
And then behave differently. I know people were noticing that with like working from home with their significant other, because they got to see their work persona.
Oh yeah.
They were like, I've never seen your work persona.
That's weird.
You seriously do that at work? Yeah. But he's sitting in the living room on his computer behaving like behave at work, and the girlfriend. Really?
Weird.
And then she goes into her office, which is actually just the kitchen, and starts doing whatever she does at work, which is a whole different thing.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lot of people who put on a lot of people who work in like retail or customer service definitely have like a fake personality that they learn to put on, or salespeople.
Yeah.
They have a fake like, yeah, I'm so excited. I'll help you out. Like kind of.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to, part of selling things.
Yeah, and it's so sensible, and I think of it as kind of a human defense mechanism in some ways, that humans adapt to their environment depending on what that is, and that's one of the reasons I think that humans require social contact. Like if you raise a human out of contact with humans never properly socialize after a certain age. Like if someone is raised in a cell by themselves, like and just fed food through like a slit, they never properly learn how to speak or like interact with people, because there's like a certain brain development that just doesn't happen. And and there were cases, like there was a famous case of a Frenchman who became lost. He was marooned on an island in French Polynesia. I believe it was French Polynesia. And when they found him several years later, when they found him, he couldn't remember how to speak French. But they knew who he was because they found that he was dressed in the clothes, and they found his books and things. And so, but he had forgotten. He'd forgotten how to speak French, and because he'd spent so many years there. And actually, that was the case of, I believe, it was either an American in Vietnam or an American who stayed in Vietnam after the Vietnam War, and they were like a prisoner of war, but they just kept him there in North Vietnam.
Yeah.
Like they never released him, but they ended up integrating into the community, and they spoke Vietnamese. And I think it was an American in Vietnam. The other person I've heard something like that with was a Japanese soldier from World War II who went into hiding in, I want to say it was like Borneo, and he went into hiding to escape the Allied troops, and he believed that the war was still going on for like another 30 years, but they weren't able to communicate properly because these people forget how to speak their native language over time.
Right. And she was the last person to speak language, but there was a woman who was left on one of the Channel Islands off of the coast of California. There had been, I want to say it was like San Juan. It was the furthest off of the Channel Islands. And there was one woman, everybody else was taken off of that island.
Mm.
But somehow or another, in some cases, people say that she jumped off the ship and went back to the island. In other cases, for whatever reason, she was left behind. But regardless, she wound up being the only woman living on this island, and she lived there by herself for 17 years. And nobody else was there. She was the only person that spoke that language. They took everybody to the mainland, and then somehow or another, they found out that she was there. They've since, apparently, I think they use it for bomb testing, this island. So they took her off that island before that began, and they brought her to the mainland. She had lived by herself for 17 years. What she thought of, she was the only one that spoke her language when they brought her back to the mainland. Everybody else had died off. And so she'd been by herself for all those years. And she died like very soon after coming back to the mainland. She couldn't communicate with anybody that she knew had passed, but she'd just been there doing her thing for all this time. And I don't know a whole lot about that story, but
have you ever heard of there's a condition that happens to people who are born and raised in the Amazon or born and raised in Papua New Guinea, in the jungles, and they live their whole life in the jungle where the visibility is they have very short range visibility. So because there's so many trees and everything, you can never see far away. And so
go to a meadow maybe, but that's all you get.
When they leave the jungle, they don't understand that things that are small are far away. Like, they don't understand that things get smaller as they get far away. So they don't have depth perception. They never develop a proper depth perception for seeing long distances. So they can't, like, if they see a car is over there, they can't tell how far it is because they never learn to judge.
What a small car, that's weird.
Yeah, they just think it's a small car. They don't have the perception of distance the same because they just have never perceived it. And there's so many things that I wonder about. What are the things that you and I have never even known to ask the question about? Have never even known to ask whether we perceive it or not.
Right.
That we don't perceive. Like, there's probably senses and things that we are completely missing, that some alien race could have, maybe, like some kind of faculty.
Yeah.
That
even something that I hadn't experienced this until about a year ago, because I've always been I'd been to Hawaii and I've been to places on the West Coast, mountainous places. At the most, you have an ocean on one side of you, but there's mountains everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I've always navigated that way. Like, if you want to know where you are, you just kind of like reason where the mountains were.
Yeah.
And so I found myself in Kansas and was feeling very disoriented. I was like, oh.
Yeah, isn't it weird?
You get so used to something like that where it's just, you just take it for granted that like, oh, there's a mountain off in the distance, even if it's like flat everywhere else, but there's a mountain over there. And if you want to go east, you just go towards that mountain.
Right. And living in Reno is very much that way because you live in a valley surrounded by mountains. And so you know where you are relative to you just see a mountain and you're like, oh, that's where I am. Like
right. Oh, that's Mount Rose, so I must be going this way, or it's Peavine, must be going this way, or clearly that's what Sparks is.
Yeah, if there's a picture taken in Washoe Valley or in Carson City, I immediately know that they're in that valley and not in the Reno part of the valley.
Right. Exactly.
And
that's something, certainly there's places where people are living other ways. They have a different way of navigating.
Mm-hmm.
That's always how I've navigated. I've always, even, when I lived in Southern California, you look at the mountains and you figure out which mountain you're near.
Well, in Hawaii, they navigate by a system they call Mauka and Makai. And I always get I think Mauka means toward the mountain. My mom says Hiro Onada surrendered in the Philippine jungle in 1974. But Mauka and Makai refer to Mauka means on the mountain side of the road, and Makai means on the ocean side of the road. So
you just got light real quick, and we could see your face for a second.
Oh, wow.
That's you being enlightened by information.
Yeah, I've become enlightened by information. The glare on my glasses bothers me, and the little thing that I could see, it's like it's just glaring on my eye. But so Mauka and Makai. Mauka, every island on Hawaii is a volcanic island. So basically, the structure of a volcanic island is in the middle. There's a big volcano. And on the outside, there's the ocean, right?
Right. So, it's very easy to know which way.
So if you build a road that goes around a volcanic island, then north and south don't really mean that much to you. But if it's on the ocean side, if it's on the Makai side, then it's on the ocean side of the road. Or if it's on the Mauka side, it's on the mountain side of the road. So if you're on the ring road going around like Kauai, if you're on the highway going around Kauai, and someone could say, then you turn Mauka and go up that road. That just means turn toward the mountain and go up the road. Or if they say turn Makai, they say turn toward the ocean and go down to the ocean, toward the ocean. And it's like those things are in Hawaii. Those are invaluable navigational tools, but they make no sense if you're in California, Right.
They make less sense if you're in California.
Well, yeah, California has mountains and ocean, but...
Right. They make no sense in Colorado, for example.
Or Kansas. They make no sense at all in Kansas.
Gone. Somebody from Kansas will tell us how the hell... But I'm sure the longer you're there, the more. Just go... 3 cornfields that way, and then turn left at the cornfield.
They're like, well, the cornfield over here.
Go right at the cornfield.
If they were in Oklahoma, they'd be like, well, the cornfield over here, it sits this way, and with the wind, and then that one will sit that way. So you can tell the different cornfields because the lay of the corn goes 2 different directions. And then and then they're like, well, and if you get enough over yonder, you'll start to smell the old tannery where they make the leather. It's over down there in that little old town in like Bolton or something. I don't know. And they just say like, you catch a whiff of it on the wind. That's how you know you're getting to the west. Like, it's so crazy to figure out how they navigate, and it's like
Perspective.
even actually, like if you go to like Tennessee has so many rolling hills and beautiful rolling hills, but a lot of the places just like if you just look at the skyline, like when you have mountains, you have easily distinguishable mountains.
Right.
Like you have Mount Rose or something. Up here we have Mount Hood, we have Mount St. Helens, we have Mount Adams. You can always kind of see them if it's clear enough.
Yeah. And you look at it and you know that round topped one.
Oh yeah, you were saying that if you look around to see Mount St. Helens because it's blue at its top. Yeah, I saw an amazing video recently that compared the size of volcanic explosions and plumes just side by side. It was a YouTube video, and it went from smallest to largest, and it was like the largest ones just dwarf the ones like Mount St. Helens was like way over on this side. It's like the largest one that's happened in the last like 150 years, but it was like this, and then the ones that were happening thousands of years ago were like these massive plumes that sent the earth into like a period of darkness for years, like stuff that's like we don't even comprehend the level of catastrophe.
As that shit calmed down.
Yeah, I'm glad that shit calmed down too. It definitely.
You wouldn't have any chance at being glad if it hadn't.
Yeah. And oh yeah, so my mom looked up. She says Naomi mentioned a true story of Juana Maria, a Nicoleño Native American left alone.
Thank you. Hey Lex, what's your mom's name?
Donna White.
Hi Donna. This isn't how we meet, but someday maybe.
I feel like she should have met you one time before, maybe, but I don't know. Maybe if she has.
Have we ever been in the same state at the same time, though?
Well, I don't know. But it may have been that I played a show at Reno Artworks once, and my family was there, and I felt like you came.
I was
or
not.
Okay,
I
guess
think I was there. Where? In the outside? At the inside?
Outside.
Huh. Yeah, no, I don't think I was there.
Yeah, so she was left. So this Juana Maria was left alone for 18 years on San Nicolas Island in the 19th century.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's a very that's a lot.
It's a lot of time. And who knows how long she would have continued to live there by herself if they had left her there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy to think about. And it's crazy to just think about what humans will do, or like what humans could become. Like if a human being was born and raised in space, like how messed up their body would be because they've never felt gravity properly. Like they would grow weird, I bet. I bet their bones would not grow properly.
Would they be tall? They might be tall.
They might be tall, or maybe they wouldn't even. They might be more like round. You know, they might be squatter and more round because there's nothing to pull them out. There's nothing to like make them extend. I don't know. That's an answer. Well, that's a question that's not, we don't have an answer to.
We may not get to know in our lifetimes, but they might send a kid up there during our lifetimes. We don't know.
Yeah, someone probably, yeah.
Did you ever, so I sent you that Kurt Vonnegut, what did I send you? I sent you Slaughterhouse-5.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about, too, there's that one of his other books is Sirens of Titan. Did you ever read that book?
No, that's one of the ones I haven't read. By the way, I've just about finished with Slaughterhouse-5. I've almost finished it.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's a great book.
But they I don't want to spoil it because it's a good book, but there's kids on Mars, basically. There's Martian kids. And then eventually they form a Martian army and come to Earth, and humans have a reason to learn that we're all one and we should just get along with each other, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I love Kurt Vonnegut. I love sci-fi books. Philip K. Dick, Kurt Vonnegut are just two of my very favorites, but also like Heinlein, Asimov. There's some really great sci-fi authors that have contributed to like the expansion of human consciousness. Even like going back to like Jules Verne. Jules Verne in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he basically invented the idea of the submarine. I mean, they
yeah
kind of had
you have to know, you can't spoil that for me because I don't know, but I have that book on my shelf, and my dad tried to get me to go.
Oh yeah.
And I watched up until the song, and then I was like, I can't, because it's gonna ruin it. Whole point of me reading this book is being excited about finding out what this monster is.
Was it the Whale of a Tale song?
Yes.
I love that song. Well,
I know, it's a good song.
It's
So
a whale
I
of a
watched the
tale
movie up until that, but I have the book and I would like to read it. But I was like, I can't watch the movie, it'll spoil it. And if I find out what it is, right, it'll ruin all the excitement of the whole book of me being like, what is it? What did they find? Is it a narwhal?
Yeah.
The part in the book I'm at right now, they're wondering if it's a narwhal. So
Jules Verne and the expansion of consciousness is definitely an interesting topic. Like Jules Verne did a lot of stuff about airships, and did you know back in the 19th century that there were mysterious airship sightings? People like, how there's UFO sightings now, but
right.
Back then people saw mysterious airships and talked to people who got out of them in the United States. And there was supposedly what is that guy's name? I feel like his name's Walter Bosley. Is that his name? Nimza. There was basically there's an organization called NIMSA, which is supposedly a German acronym, but basically is a predecessor of the America's military-industrial complex, and is related to something called the Sonora Aero Club from Sonora, California. Apparently, it was a secret society of people who developed airship technologies in the late 1800s, in the late 19th century, and predating the First World War. And basically, the story goes that was the foundation of what eventually became the Nazi UFO projects. The projects to build UFOs that the Nazis were involved in. And we took all of the Nazi scientists after the war, we took them and integrated them into NASA. So all those UFO scientists ended up in NASA or at Lockheed Martin or at Northrop Grumman or just the United States Air Force or DARPA or any of these United States military-industrial complex companies. But there was some history that may have been involved with airships. And it's like, Jules Verne was like on the cutting edge of that at the time. And H.G. Wells and the Time Machine. We talked about time travel recently.
Right.
Actually, so...
I think this is something like maybe an opportunity to kind of... Like, we really have that opportunity. I mean, I think each person in their own way is a creator, but really has an ability to manifest their own future, whether they see it come true or not. But the things that you create in your own life can become real. And I think we all have a certain responsibility to, like, what you choose to create. Like, it becomes real. So, put good out there. Put out what you want to see more of in the world, and that's what you're gonna get.
I think you've touched on like the crux of like our whole topic of working light into the world. We were talking about all these creative things, and I think that what you just said is basically the key to what we're talking about, which is that humans are kind of creators by nature. God, like when the Bible says that God created man in his image, a lot of what that means is that God is a creator. God created humans to create. Humans were created to create.
And even for people who, I don't know, I have a hard time of thinking, and this is just who I am. I have a hard time. But I think that's true for every person, even if they think of themselves as being a creator or not. You don't have to be a writer or an architect or somebody who you think of as being creating, but whatever you create for your life really extends so far beyond you. And I was, one of the things, one of the projects I got to work on this week was helping the Spoken Views Collective open mic. They host an open mic once a month. And obviously they didn't this month, and so we did like a video version. And there was some pissed off ladies, man, and they have every right to, but I also got to watch a video today which was put out from a place called Pioneer Works, which is in New York City, which is a wonderful place that I got to visit when I was there. And so they do this huge event annually called the Universe in Verse, which I guess was only live stream. You could only watch it live. And it's usually a huge event, but obviously it was, people just sent in videos of them reading poetry. And then it was all strung together in a video and put on. But it was people talking about space and nature, and it's universe in verse. But it was really positive, and it felt like every person that really participated in that. I don't know. I shouldn't say any different. I think everybody that was trying to put something forward and like creating what they wanted to make in the world. And also I got to say I couldn't have gone to that today. If it was in New York, no way. I wouldn't have even watched it online. I wouldn't have watched it online. No way I would have.
Well, I think that this is something that I actually like to talk about a lot. I know that, a lot of people don't relate to biblical things or don't relate to talking about God very much. But one of the interesting mythological and symbolic things that happens in the Bible is that God in Genesis 1, Elohim is actually what it says. It doesn't say God. It says Elohim, which means the gods. And later on in the Bible, in Psalms 82:6, which Jesus quotes, so Jesus certainly believed this because he quotes it to the Pharisees. God says to the Elohim, ye are Elohim, ye are gods, and all of you are children of El Elyon. El Elyon means God the Most High. So Elohim is actually, when Jesus says this to the Pharisees, he says, isn't it written in your scriptures, ye are gods? He says that to the Pharisees, ye are gods, and that's Jesus saying it. People need to understand that, like when Jesus was talking about being a son of God, when people call him the Son of God, it's not a unique title. Everyone is Elohim. Everyone is part of that Elohim body. So the Elohim body that creates the body of all the gods, or plural gods, or the royal we God, like all of us acting as one, create in Genesis 1. And the way that we create is by speaking. So it says, in the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and the earth was without form and void. And God's Spirit moved upon the face of the waters. The word spirit in Hebrew is ruach, which means breath, in addition to spirit. It's the same as the Greek pneuma, Greek pneuma means breath and spirit. And in Hawaiian, the word aloha means breath and love and spirit, and also means hello and goodbye. And one of my favorite sayings in Hawaiian is aloha keakua, which means God is aloha, God is the breath, God is the spirit, God is love. And the name for God, Allah, is very, very similar to aloha, very similar names. But
we all just have different names for the same thing, I think.
Right.
I think really because I think something we talked about the other day about different perspectives and people kind of living in their own. But we all experience the same things on a grand scale, and we just call them different things, and so we think maybe we're different from one another or we're apart, but we're all experiencing the same things.
Yeah.
But I think something we got on the other day was talking about, like, kind of when you're creating your own world, you can get really into your own thing and kind of get disconnected from all of that we are all together.
I think that there's definitely a subjective quality to the world. Like, everyone has their own individual universe, kind of, that they live in. They have their own headspace. But there's also the shared world that we all share together. That I call the consensus reality. It's like we have a consensus about it. But just to go back real quick to what I was saying about,
please do.
God's breath moves on the face of the water. And when breath moves across the face of water, if you think about breathing on water, it causes ripples. The vibrational wave of speaking is a rippling pattern. And the very next line after that is, and God said, and Elohim said, let there be light. And there was. And so the very first act of creation was God speaking and bringing light into existence. The very first act was vibrating reality into existence. So when you were talking about our thoughts become reality, it's a lot more literal than I think people realize. That the realm of dreams and subconsciousness, it feels like it exists out here, like in some nebulous space that's far away. And like, if you imagine something, you're like, that's not real, it's imaginary. But in order to imagine it, you've made it real in a certain sense. Real idea. And as soon as you speak a real idea, you've transformed that real idea into a real vibration. And that's a physical reality. And that physical vibration can gain momentum and steam and coalesce physical matter around it in some way, or affect the physical universe, like dropping stones into a pond affects the vibrational wavelength of the top of the pond. You're literally creating your reality by choosing to think certain things, choosing to believe certain things, choosing to speak certain things, especially.
Or like the use of like words and spelling, like spelling and creating spells, and actually, like, you can speak things into existence. You say something, it just might happen. So
that's actually
watch your mouth.
That's what the magic words abracadabra are actually Hebrew. In Aramaic, they mean stuff in Hebrew and Aramaic, but in Hebrew, it means it's abrahadabra, and abrahadabra means I create as I speak. That's the literal meaning of abracadabra, is I create as I speak. And so the spell of it is saying, like, I'm speaking this into existence. And when the Freemasons, or a witches' coven for that matter, when they close their meeting or when they close their prayers, they'll say something like, so mote it be. which is basically like, so make it be so. Whatever we've just spoken, make it be so. And the word amen is actually meaning the same thing. It's meaning let it be. Let it be this that I've just spoken.
Yeah.
And so when we have these ideas in our head, like science fiction writers, they have powerful ideas, but their science fiction becomes science fact. Philip K. Dick,
they may not have the physical technology thing, but by saying it, somebody else might be like, oh, well, I know something about this technology and I bet I can make it work. Something that they maybe wouldn't have thought of before that you've then put into their mind.
Right.
That they couldn't have thought about before.
Yeah, and
is that your mom?
No, it's our good friend Dog Melon said, Naomi is my girlfriend now. I spoke it into reality.
Oh shit.
Well, that's funny, man.
That's really funny. I like that.
But when Philip K. Dick actually,
pink now.
Philip K. Dick actually, he experienced that. He wrote. He was one of those people who just wrote constantly, and he was considered to be hypergraphic. He was diagnosed with hypergraphia, which means writing constantly. Basically, he did it obsessively or compulsively, and he also was an amphetamine user, so that probably didn't help. But
it probably helped a lot.
Well, it probably helped him a lot. But he
it's both. Yeah.
In his personal journals, I have a copy of them lying around here somewhere, which is what I was looking for. But in his personal journals, he notes that the amazing thing about him writing his sci-fi stories is that he started to live to see them become reality. And ever since him, even though he died in the 80s, when I read his book Valis, when I read his book A Scanner Darkly, and Radio Free Albemuth, and some of his other books, I was touched by how accurately he was like speaking about my experience as a human being. And in a way that like people from the 70s, when he wrote those things, wouldn't have guessed. Right. Because he was projecting things about technology, computers, and especially about psychedelics and people using psychedelics to travel through time, people using psychedelics to contact entities, things about drugs. He understood and spoke into reality back then in ways that no one had yet done. But the CIA was doing that stuff behind closed doors. So like the MK Ultra project had a lot to do with experimenting on these various substances like mescaline or LSD, and trying to find a way to make like a truth serum, or trying to find a way to turn people into sleeper agents, things like that. And
it becomes, I think, a point of almost a chicken or the egg situation. Did you or
yeah did it create this situation, or did we create it? Or it's like that's a very interesting, this is an idea I've heard from some very strung out people on drugs, is that, for example, that DMT itself, dimethyltryptamine itself, is some kind of entity, and the crystal is it manifesting into our reality in a certain sense. Like it's a hyperdimensional kind of entity. And it manifests as a crystal in order to get us to communicate with it. And the only way that it can communicate is chemically. So it can't speak to us, and it can't write to us, and it can't like do any of that. But this psychic being or spiritual being projects a physical crystal into existence in order to communicate with us. And when we talk about cannabinoid receptors in the human brain has receptors for cannabis, for cannabinoids, and it has receptors for tryptamines, dimethyltryptamine being one of them, but of course there's others, melatonin and tryptophan, but they and many others. But they our brain has literal devices built into it to receive those chemical communications. And so mushrooms, cactuses, the ayahuasca vine, the Psychotria viridis tree, Mimosa hostilis or Mimosa tenuiflora, they have chemicals that they create that are their chemical method of communication. And they communicate profound things to human minds. Not just it's not just like this is a chemical that keeps animals away. It's not just like a poison that keeps things away. It also communicates on a very profound level with being's consciousness itself. And in some sense, the manifestations of those psychedelic chemicals represent a different kind of psychic life form or a different kind of spiritual life form that we don't really understand. And so we think of, when we talk about, when there's a lot of materialists, scientific materialist type thinkers who think, for example, that consciousness arises from chemicals. The chemicals interact in the brain and that gives rise to consciousness. My personal model is kind of the opposite. I believe that consciousness is kind of a field and that the brain is kind of like a radio antenna that receives consciousness. That's my idea of it. Like the brain is like a device or a machine that receives, that is a receiver and transmitter for those things. But when it comes to the chemical communications of things, when you think about human moods and human interactions, how much of that has to do with hormones? Like when you were like a hormonal teenager, how awful was that? You know, it was terrible.
Bad times.
It was terrible.
Bad times.
And
bad decisions were made.
It really influences your ability to think, and chemicals do. And so it's not purely consciousness acting on this, but there's a chemical equilibrium of the brain chemistry that is kept in sync, kept in a certain level that has to do with the chemical balances of these various different kinds of chemicals in your brain. So like when we're talking about the dopamine switch, like we've gotten very good at pressing the dopamine button in our own brain. Like notifications, yeah, DLC, yeah, click, click, click. Let's, that's like, that's one of the reasons that that pornography, like internet pornography, is something that I believe is so damaging to people. It's like, as a concept, and film it is not that big of a deal. But the thing is that people who consume it are pressing that button in their brain over and over and over and over and over again. And they always need something new, and they always need these things that creates a chemical pathway in their brain that's habitual. And it keeps them from being able to have natural sexual experiences with actual human beings in a natural way, because they've essentially become a drug addict to the hormones that are involved in that process. And they become addicted to that, to the pressing of that button over and over and over again. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm wondering.
Sex.
Oh, I should say.
It just either got really bad, like really good because you're only with your partner and have nothing to do, or you spend a lot of time on Pornhub.
Yeah.
Like, there's not that many things that could have just happened, really.
Yeah, you cut out for part of that, so I missed part of what you even said. But
Yeah, you know what? You cut out on part of your thing too, which is Discord being like, y'all are getting further away.
Yeah, it's like you were drifting further away from the light all the time.
As soon as you got onto that, you're getting further, and you're getting time. Which
Well,
you're beginning to seem like you're beginning to look like a
shadowy,
witness that doesn't want to be seen.
yeah,
You're
a shadowy
like
demon figure.
pretty soon here you're gonna have like a voice changer device so that we can't tell who or
Yeah. Welcome to my secret Illuminati cult. You know.
We knew this when we got on here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we are over. We're at 2 hours and 5 minute mark right now.
Yeah.
So why don't we?
Does anyone care? Does my boyfriend talking about?
Yeah, after that, they've forgotten. Your new boyfriend, he hasn't said anything, so.
Well.
Oh well.
Well, he made it as close as anyone will to my room. Welcome to my bedroom.
There you go. So what are some of our let's give some finishing thoughts on ways to enhance light in your life. What are some ways that you personally employ to keep yourself going and keep yourself positive and thinking about things in a positive, light-based way to create your reality into something you want to live?
I think being able to surround yourself with other people that are that way is really helpful, even how in whatever format that might be. But you get to choose who you surround yourself with, and those people have a big impact. Like we were talking about how people behave differently in different social settings. But you get to choose more or less what social settings you keep choosing to put yourself into. So, finding positive ways like that, as opposed to, people who were seeing, the negative. There's always positive sides to things. That's not to say that you can't talk about things that are negative that are going on, but there's always a positive, and to be able to find that, there's always something good going on that you can figure out.
Yeah. So one of your recommendations, I would guess, would be draw more, make more art, make more music.
Not necessarily. I mean, yes, because that's how I deal with things. But I think everybody has a different.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different thing that they're into. If it's golf, whatever. Yeah, go hang out with your golf buddies, but you don't got to be that guy that gets mad when you lose or when you do terrible. Like, it's still good. You were just out in the sun. You were still out in the sunshine. Like, that's good. There's positive in everything, and you can go try to find that.
Right. I think that my closing remarks would be earlier I started to list what my personal practice consists of. Well, I got partway through. So fasting is part of it for me. Scripture reading is part of it. But scripture to me is a category of texts, and it means like any type of text that is spiritually inspiring to you personally. So
I got this one. This is my copy that I've been reading lately.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
It got eaten by a dog, so it's covered in tape.
Well, that at least it has personality.
The dog really liked it too. You gotta let your friend.
Yeah. He's got to salivate somehow. So it's important to have something to digest philosophically, let's say, or to be a food for your mind. I don't know, did this just freeze? Oh, it just froze on me, but I guess it's fine. So it's important to always have something that you're working on digesting with your mind and your spirit, in addition to your body. To have. Yeah. I mean, you don't always have to be digesting, but it's it's good to keep feeding yourself certain types of nutrients. So for me, meditation, prayer, fasting, and scripture are the basic ways that I keep myself nourished in the spiritual sense. And for me, I need a physical practice also. So I do yoga and Tai Chi, and I'm getting back into running. I had my back injury from falling off that bridge, kept me from running for a long time, but I'm finally getting back into it. And I think that it's important to balance what we were talking about those three brains. Like there's the gut brain, there's the heart brain, and there's the head brain. Like you got to balance your physical life and your emotional life and your mental life. You've got to balance all of those things and not become too dominated by any of them, really, to the expense of any of the others. And in that sense, we're all masters of our own destiny. When I was talking about the different chemicals that we use as mood adjusters, people use that as a way to like control their ship of life, to control their mood. It's not necessarily the healthiest way to do it, but what I wanted to impress upon people is a lot of people feel like they don't have much control over their life. They feel out of control, and they go for things that give them an illusion of control, like video games or gambling. Gambling can give you an illusion of control over your money, even though you don't really have control over your money. You're like, you can't afford to waste it, but you do anyway. And I don't know if this just cut out or what, but the ending thought for me is that the power that you have to create your own reality. You basically have the power to... You cut out there for a long time. I'm not sure if you...
You cut out there for a long time.
Okay.
All I said was that you have actually turned into a guy with a changer.
Well, at least on my end, it should be broadcasting my voice because it's on my side. So I was finishing my thought, and it's that I want to impress upon people exactly how much power they have to shape their own reality. We have a lot of power. Just like we were talking about those science fiction things, you can imagine things into existence. The more you start thinking about something, the more you bring it closer to your life. That's that idea of the law of attraction, the law of manifestation. But I think people understand it from like The Secret in kind of a shallow way. But but it's true that what you focus on is what you start moving toward, even if you don't want to. So if you're always focused on things that are negative or bad, that's what you're naturally going to gravitate towards. And a lot of what I get afraid of in the media, or like, I'm not blaming the media for this in particular. I mean, they are somewhat to blame, but when people are talking about like the media sucks, man. It's just fake news. What they're protesting against is the fact that the media makes a lot of money on selling these negative narratives that scare people. There's a lot of fear involved. And when we have to choose what we're going to put into our bodies and choose what we're going to put into our minds, we should choose healthier options. So a lot of media is junk food. Like we were talking about Infinity War. Infinity War is pure junk food for the brain.
Yeah. Movies, they've done so well.
Yeah, or just like if you're gonna...
Can you see how big I'm rolling my eyes when I say...
Yeah.
They've done so well.
Yeah. It's kind of sad and shocking, but at the same time, it makes a lot of sense. And I would just like to let everyone be blessed and free and benefiting more and more as much as they can to do.
What are you doing?
I'm
Is this you rolling your eyes really big or what? You're looking for something.
I'm looking for my ukulele because usually I end with a musical prayer.
Oh, fantastic!
So so do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I don't know. I have lots of final thoughts, but they've been dispersed throughout. So thanks for joining the conversation. Anyone who may have legitimately watched this for 2 hours, holy shit, way to go.
Yeah, they're definitely cool people if they made it this far. I love the sound of the ukulele. This is one of the things that keeps light in my life. Actually, is just it's a very light instrument. You know, it's
yeah.
It's not that. I don't know. Maybe not. And I leave these things with our good friends. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I love you, Naomi. Thank you very much for joining us. And
thank you for having me.
And it made my day to just be able to have a nice conversation with you.
That it did. I'm glad. It was funny yesterday when you posted about being on a walk Saturday. I was like, Lex, I'm not getting on the phone with you tonight.
Oh yeah, I skipped a day. I totally forgot.
It's why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, good night, everyone. I'm gonna end the stream.
Yeah, end the stream.